The story we will see begins from a balcony, where we see Zayed, one of the protagonists, who after a delicious dream, felt like throwing himself at a goose. Okay, but before that, let's start from the beginning. Zayed approached the protagonist and told him it was time to wake up, calling him young master. The protagonist, still half asleep, murmured Zayed's name. He answered affirmatively, asking if there was anything else. The protagonist, with a smile, reminded him that when you wake up a handsome man, it is always necessary to give him a kiss. Zayed, curious, mentioned that on one occasion the protagonist had commented that a man's kiss was a specification. The protagonist nodded, confirming that it was so. In a kind of jacuzzi, Zayed asked the protagonist if the water temperature was okay. The protagonist, enjoying the moment, replied that it was perfect and asked him to shave his beard, mentioning that they would go out later. Zayed, surprised, commented that he had barely gotten away with it. The protagonist, with a smile, wondered if Zayed was going to miss the opportunity to be with that beautiful face. In his mind, Zayed pondered whether the protagonist was aware of what he was saying. Despite Zayed's appearance, the protagonist told him that he was very shy, and although they had been partners for 5 years, he did not know how to react to his jokes. As Zayed looked at the protagonist's body and shaved him, he got distracted and accidentally hurt him. Worried, he apologized, asking if he was okay and suggesting he hurry to get treatment. The protagonist, downplaying it, replied that he was fine and that it had just happened, although he complained about his sensitive constitution. Zayed, feeling guilty, thought about how careless he had been, knowing how sensitive the protagonist was while holding a blade as his mind wandered. The protagonist, touching Zayed's hand, assured him that if the pain didn't go away, it was no problem since he could take painkillers. Zayed, with concern, called him young master. The protagonist, smiling, reminded him that he had improved a lot since his arrival, mentioning that on his first day, he couldn't even adjust the water temperature, which had made him fear he would be boiled to death. The scene shifted 5 years back, where Zayed introduced himself, saying his name was Zayed Sisson. Seo Anka, with an incredulous expression, asked if he was really asking him to live with something like that. At 16, Seo Anka felt overwhelmed by the situation. Tetis, who was present, explained that he had been deliberately selected for being an outsider, making it clear that the people there would be his toys and not his bodyguards. Seo Anka, reflecting on his new life, commented that at least until he became an adult, they would have to live together without separating for a moment. Although they had never pressured him about his height, he realized that Zayed was really big. Tetis, smiling, suggested that maybe a person of normal size would be needed to take care of him. In his mind, Seo Anka thought that Tetis knew very well that he was unnecessarily sensitive, yet he had still put him in front of a man who was like a rock, although it was worth admiring his face. Seo Anka, curious, asked Zayed how old he was. Zayed replied that he was 24. Seo Anka, surprised, commented that he was younger than he thought, but still 8 years older than him. Zayed, bowing, asked him to take care of him. Seo Anka, smiling, hinted that there must be a lot for him to teach. In a bar, Zayed shared his thoughts about his youth, remembering that back then he still had a nice side, but now he had become a cunning rogue. From the beginning, he had decided to protect Seo Anka until he became an adult, wondering if their life together was coming to an end. However, he made it clear that the young master, as valuable as royalty, was not someone who could be touched at will. As Zayed continued speaking, a voice suddenly echoed in the bar, calling Seo. It was Tarek, who greeted him in a carefree tone. Seo responded with a simple hello. Tarek, with an air of surprise, told Seo that he was acting as if he were going to fall asleep like that, questioning why he couldn't do it. Seo, smiling, explained that that was called being kind and reminded him that he had told him not to be a man. Tarek was about to harm Seo, but before that could happen, Zayed intervened, preventing Tarek from hitting Seo. Firmly, Zayed asked the young master if he should turn him over to the police. Seo, with a determined attitude, replied no, that he just needed to throw him out. Despite his popularity, he acknowledged that it was difficult to deal with the situation. This time they had safely overcome the problem, but he noticed that the number of people obsessed with him was increasing. Zayed, worried, advised him to be more careful. Seo nodded, assuring him that he would. In his mind, Zayed reflected on the youngest son of a powerful family who was soft and gentle with everyone, which surely confused people. He thought that at that moment he could easily harm him if he wanted to, wondering why Seo was so calm after making his blood boil. Seo, interrupting his thoughts, called him by his name. Zayed responded with a yes. Seo asked him to prepare the car, as he was going to the hotel. Once at the hotel, Zayed informed Seo that they said there were no adjoining rooms today. Seo's girl, overhearing the conversation, repeated that there were no adjoining rooms and asked if he was the kind of person who only got excited when someone else was nearby. Seo, with an ironic smile, returned the question, stating that was why he was so careful. He then suggested to Zayed that maybe he should step away for a while that day. Zayed, firmly, replied no. In his mind, Zayed thought it would be perfect if Seo lost interest and decided to go back. Seo's girl, trying to find a solution, commented that. Zayed, curious about the conversation, asked what the call was about. Seo, with a smile, replied that it was for dinner later. Later, at the Hanja Lonene, a boy greeted Seo with concern, asking if he was okay being alone. Seo assured him that he would just come after a quick meal. The boy, determined, said he would guide him. Seo, turning to Zayed, informed him that the heir of the county was requesting a meeting and that he couldn't have a bodyguard there. He asked him not to worry, assuring him that he would be back soon. In his mind, Zayed pleaded for him to return. Then, the employee boy indicated for Seo to follow him. As they walked, Seo thought that, judging by the boy's mood, he seemed to be trying to apologize for the commotion the day before, acting like a model student. Upon opening the door, he was welcomed by Hanja, who greeted him warmly. Seo thanked him for the invitation, and Hanja, smiling, said he just wanted to thank him for accepting his invitation. Seo looked around, and Hanja commented that the place was simpler than he had imagined, explaining that it was the space he used for private meetings. Hanja, unsure of what kind of drinks he would like, had prepared a variety. Seo, satisfied, replied that that was all he needed. Hanja, curious, asked if he liked light drinks. Seo admitted that he did, but that he could only drink that type of wine. In his mind, Seo reflected that this didn't mean he couldn't drink strong drinks, as his constitution was sensitive to all kinds of things. Hanja, in a serious tone, apologized again for what had happened the day before. Seo, recognizing the sincerity of the apology, thought it was rare to find a noble who easily admitted his mistakes. He told Hanja that it was no big deal, but that he was apologizing again. Hanja, somewhat embarrassed, insisted that it was not a trivial matter, explaining that he felt ashamed to show such behavior to a guest who could become family. Seo, smiling, commented that if conversations about marriage were taking place, they would become family. Hanja, a bit nervous, asked if he happened to not like it. Seo laughed, and Hanja, relieved, decided to take it as a good joke, mentioning that his whole family was good people and that he hoped Seo would take good care of them. Seo, with a wink, asked what about him, suggesting that he could also be a good younger brother to Hanja. Hanja, acknowledging that their meeting had been brief, admitted that it was difficult to talk about it lightly, but he felt it could be the case. Seo, encouraged, asked if he could speak informally. Hanja, surprised, hesitated on how to do so with a guest, but Seo assured him that there was no problem, as he was neither older nor of a higher status than him. Hanja, still hesitant, felt pressured, and Seo asked him if he wasn't going to stop making him feel bad. Finally, Hanja agreed, saying he understood. On the other hand, Zayed was reflecting on what they had said about light food, wondering if a private and informal meal for two could last 5 hours. At that moment, Seo came out and greeted him enthusiastically, calling him by name. Zayed, in a serious tone, reminded him that he was quite late. Hanja, who was present, addressed Zayed, explaining that he was Seo's bodyguard and that he couldn't let him go alone, so he had come down with him. Seo, trying to downplay the situation, assured that he hadn't drunk that much. Hanja, with an ironic smile, commented that it was curious that he hadn't even called him Hyung until the end, promising that when they became true brothers, he would call him that until he got tired of it. Zayed, observing the interaction, thought it was strange that they were starting to pretend to be friends just because they had seen each other. The idea of imagining Seo and Hanja alone and drunk irritated him. Finally, Zayed turned to Hanja, stating that he would take care of Seo from that moment on. After that, Zayed had one of those delightful dreams about Seo. Upon waking up, Seo told himself that he was crazy. He hadn't even dreamed of that, but he couldn't believe he had such a strange dream. He reflected that all of this was because he had seen that scene in the hotel. Meanwhile, Zayed was thinking about Seo, questioning how his master could act that way, asserting that he would take responsibility. He wondered if he was really going to force him to do something like that, feeling that it would be great to work hard to resolve it. Well, it was then that Zayed, carried away by his thoughts, couldn't help but get excited. And let me tell you, that Zayed seems to have a high-caliber rifle. Wink wink. The next day, Zayed approached Seo and told him it was morning, calling him young master. Seo, in response, waved his hand. Zayed, thinking to himself, reflected that there was nothing unreasonable about the situation, but he couldn't believe that Seo hadn't woken up until that hour. He wondered where it hurt. At that moment, Seo grabbed him by the clothes, surprising Zayed, who exclaimed his name. Seo, with a tone of frustration, told him that he hadn't been able to sleep well because of him, repeating that he had mentioned it several times. He then asked him what he was looking at. At that moment, Zayed got so excited that he couldn't contain his little friend, although it's not little at all. This made Zayed flee from that place, while Seo told himself that the guy had surprised him. On the other hand, Zayed was reflecting in his mind that in the past he thought Seo was cute no matter what he did, but nowadays he often went beyond what he expected. He wondered if it was possible to put that in a person's body, thinking that at that level his lover and everything else would flee screaming. Meanwhile, Seo was questioning whether Zayed had not gone out with anyone. He thought that due to his height, he could be extremely violent, which in turn made him think that it would be very sexy. Yes, my friend, I said it a while ago, the guy has a shotgun that leaves you stunned. A few days later, Seo mentioned that his father had told him to come home because he missed him after a long time. Zayed, surprised, asked if he meant today, pointing out that it was already past noon. Seo explained that since it was his father's day off, he had to have dinner and then spend the night with him. He mentioned that his father was very nice, but that his taste in food didn't match his own. Seo liked fresh and light food, but his father always offered him only spicy food. Zayed, in a serious tone, told him that he really didn't know how valuable food was. He reminded him that if he complained about the food in front of him, he should keep in mind that he had even eaten pig food. Seo, not giving it much importance, assumed that he should have a good lunch and then leave. He asked Zayed to hurry and eat too, assuring him that the abalone was very good. Later, one of the workers approached Seo and told him that it had been a while. Seo, determined, asked him to help him move his luggage, indicating that he would go directly to his father and that he should show Zayed his room. The worker nodded, asking if it was okay to take Mr. Sisson first. Seo, confused, asked why Zayed. The worker explained that Tetis had ordered him to be called as soon as he arrived. Seo, somewhat annoyed, wondered why that had so much to do with his servant. He then told the worker that if his Hyung bothered him, he should tell him. Zayed, overhearing the conversation, commented that it was curious how popular Tetis Anka was, as he called someone and then left the place. While observing a portrait, he mentioned Baron Anka and Baroness when a voice interrupted him, asking what he was doing there. Zayed turned around and saw Tetis, who, upon looking at him, noticed a resemblance to young Master Seo. Tetis, surprised, asked what he meant by that. Zayed explained that he was referring to Tetis' mother. In response, Tetis threw a book at Zayed, shouting at him how dare he say something like that, warning him that if he spoke that way again, he wouldn't let him. Zayed, feeling embarrassed, apologized. Tetis, with disdain, commented on the people from the desert and asked if Seo was still wearing the bottom part of his clothes. Zayed replied that life was always the same, and Tetis continued talking about the importance of lineages. Zayed, curious, asked why he had called him with such urgency. Tetis assured him that he had good news for him as well, informing him that it was time to finish his mission and asking if he needed time to get his affairs in order. Tetis explained that once everything was clearly resolved, he would give him new instructions and asked him to wait until then. Zayed nodded, understanding the situation. Tetis reminded him not to forget why he had appointed him as Seo's bodyguard. Zayed, reflecting, admitted that he knew it in his head, but he couldn't just be Seo Anka's loyal servant for the rest of his life. He expressed that he didn't want to do that and that the promised reward from Tetis was a large sum of money. He acknowledged that he was happy that everything would be over soon. Zayed remembered what Seo had told him once, assuring him not to worry because he would take responsibility for him even if he got married. At that moment, the memory of that day vividly appeared in his mind. Zayed thought it was good news for him, as it was something he had wanted to do quickly from the beginning. He felt fortunate to be able to stay in a room away from Seo, the young master. Just then, Zayed had an encounter with one of the local boys, and if I tell you what Zayed said to the boy, I might get banned because literally, Zayed wanted to enter the poor boy's cave. Yes, it's disturbing. At that moment, Seo arrived and asked what they were doing there. Zayed, surprised, greeted him with, "Ah, young master." Seo, curious, asked what he was going to do, and if it had anything to do with Zayed. A nervous boy present replied that it was nothing. Zayed, distrustful, asked how long he had been watching and if he had heard the conversation they had had earlier. Seo, with a smile, commented that it wasn't right to pretend to be someone without care, suggesting that his innocent servant would be surprised. The servant, confused, murmured, innocent?" Zayed, in his mind, wondered how foolish Seo thought he was. Then, Seo asked Zayed if he had any complaints about his servant being innocent. The servant, embarrassed, apologized to Seo. Seo told him to just apologize to Zayed and leave. The servant, nervous, turned to Zayed, apologizing. Seo, in a playful tone, asked Zayed if he liked men. Zayed, surprised, asked what he was suddenly saying.
After a while, Seo and Zayed decided to take a walk to a place called Noria. As they walked, Seo commented that it was hot and that her legs hurt. Zayed, observing the long line, suggested that he might talk to the manager, mentioning that in a place like that, if he gave a few cents, he could get something. Seo, jokingly, replied that this meant there would be no romance and complained again about the heat, adding that it must be depressing to live in the desert. She nostalgically remembered the seawater of Teppan, mentioning that although it was also hot there in the summer, she couldn't get used to the heat of this place. Zayed, in his mind, reflected on the strange feeling that the distance between them had decreased, wondering if that was a result of his own attitude. Seo, feeling the discomfort of the moment, said it was harder to stay still. Zayed, trying to help, offered that if she wanted, he could hold her. Seo, surprised by the proposal, wondered if he really wanted to hold her there, in the middle of the crowd. Although she knew Zayed was strong and good at lifting people, the idea of doing it in that place felt a bit uncomfortable. At one point, Zayed lifted Seo, wondering if the silence had been positive and if he was going too far, offering to put her down if she wanted. Seo, laughing, told him that he was probably the only one who would do something like that and that she felt comfortable in his arms. Once inside the Ferris wheel, Seo noticed that Zayed was somewhat tense and commented that he must also have a lot of difficulties. Zayed replied that that was what he was used to. Seo, worried, asked him if his arms didn't hurt, reminding him that he had been in line with her for a full 30 minutes. Zayed assured her that he was fine. Seo, feeling jealous, expressed her desire to change people, wondering if that would mean she would like men. Then, she added that she was so jealous that men with her tastes must seem very handsome to her. Zayed, with a smile, said not necessarily. Seo, however, insisted that it wasn't that they hadn't tried to flirt with him once or twice, and wondered what was happening all of a sudden. Zayed confessed that he never thought he would act like a child in puberty at his age. Seo, surprised, commented that this was too unexpected and asked him what he was thinking. Zayed, sincerely, said that it was all thanks to her. He had even ridden the Ferris wheel, although he couldn't see the outside scenery. Seo, feeling that she was becoming strange for no reason, wondered how much time was left before they would get off. In her mind, she told herself that she couldn't believe what she was doing with that calm face. Finally, she told Zayed that she was fine and asked what kind of beast he thought she was. Zayed, in a playful tone, told her that the young master seemed to be going through a tough time, but it looked like she was having a worse time. Well, once in the car, both of them ate a lot of ice cream, and it was vanilla. Moreover, Zayed strongly triggered Seo. As I remember, I told you he had a high-caliber weapon. Wink, wink. After those scenes, Zayed was talking to Seo when suddenly the car was hit hard. Alarmed, Seo exclaimed that she couldn't believe they were trying to flip the car. Zayed, determined, told her to hold on tight. The car received another impact, and Zayed, worried, asked if she was okay, urging her to cover herself with a blanket for a moment. Seo, confused, asked where he was going. Zayed explained that he first needed to check what the situation was. With a decisive movement, he kicked and opened the car door. Upon exiting, a voice told him that the car had flipped over, but that everything was fine. Zayed, irritated, wondered why that bastard was there. At that moment, Zayed was taken by several mercenaries who injected him with a substance. Helpless, he thought that those bastards were using him for everything. The lead mercenary, Hashim, approached and told him that he had come prepared because he knew his temperament, assuring him that he was only there to have a peaceful conversation and asking him to be quiet. Zayed firmly warned him not to do it. Hashim, with an arrogant smile, replied that he was still arrogant and asked him not to make a scene, reminding him that he had no intention of harming him. He then mentioned that it seemed there was another person in the car. Zayed, determined, told him to just try to touch her. Hashim, referring to the poison, asked if it was already taking effect, commenting that they said people couldn't last even a second. He bragged about having bought it at a high price and wondered why Zayed was still standing. Zayed, in his mind, told himself that he needed to regain his senses. Suddenly, a voice called his name. It was Seo, and Zayed, in an apologetic tone, told her he was sorry. With those words, Zayed fainted. Later, Zayed woke up imprisoned in a dungeon, wondering if he had fallen and been caught immediately. Upon seeing someone, he recognized a rat, the guy he had seen at the hotel, remembering that he had to throw him over the railing at that moment. The person, visibly nervous, apologized. At that moment, Hashim arrived, telling him that he had woken up so quickly and that he needed to scold that doctor. In his mind, Zayed identified Hashim Python, the leader of Casino, one of the most famous forces in the desert. He couldn't believe he was meeting someone who had been fighting so hard with Oasis. Hashim, with a mocking smile, told him not to be sad, that it wasn't that he had bad luck, but that he had good luck. Zayed, determined, asked him to tell him about his business. Hashim, with disdain, replied that anyway, even if he did that, he had no manners, referring to Zayed as a guy who didn't even have dry blood on his head. Zayed, feeling uncomfortable, asked him to give him some clothes, and then inquired about the boy from the car. Hashim, recalling, said he was just about to ask what that fool was doing, questioning what he had been doing since the town had started appearing to be surrounded by such a pretty boy. Zayed, with a threatening look, warned him to just touch him because he would kill him. On the other hand, Seo was rubbing her foot, feeling the pain and wondering what sense it made to grab someone without giving them time to put on their shoes. They took Zayed away, but all she could do was complain about her situation. She remembered how Zayed had shouted that he would take responsibility, but she couldn't believe she was stuck unable to do anything. With concern, she thought that nothing should have happened to Zayed. At that moment, someone entered the place where Seo was trapped. Upon seeing Zayed, she realized it was him. Zayed, relieved, asked if she was okay. Seo, without thinking, gave him a hug. Zayed, still worried, asked her again if she was okay and if anything had happened. Hashim, observing the scene, commented that he was a young master and that he actually thought it didn't seem real. Zayed, in a defiant tone, told Hashim that if he was done with his errands, he should bring some tea before he killed him. Hashim, with a mocking smile, replied that he had a strong temperament. Zayed, keeping his composure, warned that if he did something like that again, everyone, from the children to the elders of the casino, would be expelled. Seo, still with her injured foot, asked him to pick her up and leave. Zayed, surprised, exclaimed how he could do that, but Seo insisted that they get out of there without making a scene. Finally, Zayed agreed and said it was fine. After leaving that place, Zayed was putting Seo's shoes on in the car. Seo, with a smile, told him that she actually wanted to act silly, but she couldn't do it when Zayed was so anxious. She assured him that she would give a proper explanation later and asked him to take a break today, since she was also tired. In her mind, Seo reflected that she thought Zayed was just a fool who was easy to tease, but in reality, he was a pervert with a dangerous charm. She realized it was fun getting to know him. Seo asked him to wake her up when they arrived at their destination. Zayed, nodding, replied that it was fine. Meanwhile, inside, Zayed questioned when he had become so compassionate. He told himself that once you bite and suck, he didn't believe you had become his lover. He thought that a collision of that magnitude in the desert was no big deal. Zayed continued to reflect on how the lives of 82 people, who were like a family, could be compared to the life of a noble. However, when he saw that the young master was truly in danger, he realized that the situation was more difficult than he had imagined. Upon arriving at their destination, Seo was enjoying a jacuzzi and exclaimed that she finally felt alive. Zayed, concerned, asked if the temperature was okay. Seo replied that it was perfect, except for the pepper that was hitting her back. Zayed, feeling guilty, apologized. In his mind, he thought that no matter how trashy the situation was, he had no intention of being with him at that moment. Seo continued talking, saying that she had never thought she would be in that position in her life, and that it wasn't as bad as she had imagined. She added that she wished Zayed were her older brother. Zayed, reflecting, thought that there wouldn't be much difference between him and Tetis, as both were considered human trash. However, he couldn't help but interrupt her, asking if she meant the older brother putting his penis on the younger brother's back. Seo, surprised, commented that that was a bit strange. After that, Seo told Zayed that it wasn't heavy to lift and move her every time. Zayed, concerned, reminded her that she had hurt her foot. Seo, feeling vulnerable, commented that she felt like a baby. Zayed, with a smile, suggested that she just take a nap and that he would explain everything when she woke up. Seo, in a pleading tone, asked him not to leave. Zayed, surprised, wondered how he could leave her alone. Seo, sincerely, confessed that she didn't want to be alone and asked him to stay by her side. Zayed sighed, understanding her need, and agreed to stay. The next day, Zayed woke up and thought to himself that he hadn't slept well after the accident the night before. He assumed it was because the young master was by his side and was surprised at how pretty she looked in the morning. Seo, noticing his restlessness, told him that her heart was beating very fast and asked if they could hear the explanation. Zayed, a little nervous, admitted that he was very excited yesterday and wondered if Seo might be interested in a man. Seo, intrigued, asked him why and if there was any reason why she shouldn't date men. Zayed, surprised, replied that he was saying that at that moment and that boys were dangerous. He then questioned since when he had cared so much about Seo's well-being. Seo, noticing his confusion, asked why there was no answer. Zayed reflected that it was then that he began to have real hopes that Seo Anka would be safe. In his mind, Zayed didn't understand how he had changed so much, but now he didn't want to see the young master in danger or mingling with other boys. He really didn't know what to do. Seo, realizing his discomfort, asked if he was really jealous. Zayed, although he felt relaxed, admitted that there was nothing to worry about and that he was still quite satisfied with the situation. Seo, with a smile, commented that "I'm jealous" would be nice, but that he had made a hateful comment and didn't know what kind of response he expected. Then, Seo proposed making a bet, stating that the deadline would be until she got married. If Zayed said one thing, she would let him enjoy the night as it should be. Zayed, surprised, asked if that was true. Seo explained that it meant giving her up with just one word. Zayed, excited, exclaimed that he couldn't refuse a bet like that and asked for a hint. Seo, amused, told him that she no longer doubted and that he was bold, suggesting he prepare his mind while he washed up. Zayed, intrigued, asked her if she was doing something at that moment. Seo, with a mischievous smile, told him that she had many questions about what had happened yesterday and that he should think about it. Later, in the dining room, Zayed expressed his desire to invite Lonene to meet with him. Seo, intrigued, asked why. Zayed explained that yesterday's accident had happened because of him, as it was a safe travel route and no escort had been attached. He stated that once something happens, you can't just move on. Seo, remembering a tattooed guy, asked if he was referring to Hashim. Zayed confirmed that he was, and explained that in the desert, they often use their base of operations as a group name. He mentioned that there were many groups like this in the desert, such as the one he belonged to. Oasis. Hashim Python, whom they met yesterday, was the leader of Casino, one of those groups. Zayed continued by saying that there was a part where he had lied. Seo, curious, asked if he was referring to a short stay in the desert. Zayed nodded and explained that in the arid desert, there were frequent fights for the best places to live. The oasis where he lived was like a paradise by desert standards, but it was always prey to other groups. Since his adolescence, he had defended his home with swords, but when large groups began to invade Oasis, he could no longer block them with swords. To make a living, he needed not only his fists but also money, so he ended up leaving Oasis. People had to leave their places of origin behind. Zayed mentioned that the people who lost the Oasis lived in other places, and that he had left the desert since then. He never thought anyone would be interested in him returning. Seo, intrigued, asked why Hashim had sought him out. Zayed explained that they had asked him to connect them with Oasis because they had information they wanted to share. He had been looking for a way to contact Oasis for over a year, but fortunately, they had caught him. Seo, worried, asked if he had then told them where Oasis was and if it was okay. Zayed clarified that no, he had only told them how to contact Oasis. The person currently leading Oasis was very wise, so it wouldn't be a big problem. Additionally, he planned to tell them to reject everything Hashim said because they would soon receive a large compensation. Seo, intrigued, asked why he had to lie about being from the desert. Zayed, with a tone of embarrassment, explained that he felt more ashamed than about how people looked at him or their distrust of desert people. He didn't want to think about the dirty and disgusting view of the desert that he had seen since he was a teenager, hitting people. That childhood memory was also the reason he felt jealous of Seo, who was like a flower in a greenhouse. Seo, understanding his perspective, mentioned that she thought he might be biased and that he was going to get angry, but that it couldn't be helped. Zayed, reflecting, wondered what it was about him that made him say such things. Seo, recalling the situation, told him that she had heard a brief explanation and asked if he would really ask Lonene to pick them up. Zayed nodded, but Seo warned him not to reveal that he had been attacked because of his fault. Zayed, surprised, asked if it was really necessary to disclose such details, assuring her that he was only going to say they had an accident. Seo, logically, reminded him that if he had an accident, whatever the cause, he, as her bodyguard, would be responsible. Zayed, accepting the possibility of punishment, said he would happily accept it as long as he wasn't cast aside from Seo Anka. Moreover, he was sure that his accomplice, Count Lonene, couldn't do anything to him. Seo, frustrated, asked if it was necessary to make noise. Zayed, looking for a solution, asked her what they should do. Seo suggested that since the state of the car was a disaster, he should call it in. Zayed, feeling anxious, wondered why he was so restless. Later, at Count Longene's mansion, a blonde boy entered and said he had heard he was being called, asking what was happening. It was Hanja Lonene, the Count's eldest son. The Count replied that he assumed he should go out and greet the guests. Hanja, curious, asked if he was referring to Seo Anka, recalling that he had heard the news that the scheduled arrival date had been delayed a few days ago, but he was surprised to learn that they were suddenly going to pick him up. The Count explained that Seo had said she was injured, and that he had heard that the sole of her foot had been hit against a stone. Hanja, with a look of surprise, nodded. The Count continued by saying that he had heard Seo was a serious love-struck person, and it seemed that was true, as she had thrown a tantrum saying she could no longer move. Hanja, with a tone of disdain, commented that it didn't matter that Seo was younger than him, she would still be an adult. The Count, worried, told Hanja that he had been instructed to bring a doctor and go pick up Seo as soon as possible because she was sick and dying. After that, in the middle of the desert, Seo was greeted by Hanja, who introduced himself as Hanja Lonene and said this was his secretary, Hyan. Seo, with a smile, introduced herself as Seo Anka and asked him to understand that she couldn't get up due to her foot injury. Hanja, surprised, commented that he couldn't believe a man could be as beautiful as a flower. He then informed her that he had brought the doctor and suggested they treat the injury first. The doctor approached Seo and asked her to show him the injured area. Zayed, observing the scene, thought it was shameless to behave like that in a situation like this. The doctor told Seo that she had a good bandage. Seo, with a smile, commented that her bodyguard skills were quite good. Zayed, a little irritated, asked the doctor how long he was going to keep playing around. The doctor, feeling pressured, apologized and explained that they would start by disinfecting and applying a bandage to help the wound heal. Seo, feeling the pain, exclaimed that it hurt. The doctor, concerned, asked if she was sick. Seo, in a resigned tone, explained that it was because she had a sensitive constitution and asked him to do what he had to do. At that moment, Hyan asked Hanja if he had ever heard of such a constitution. Hanja, recalling what his father had said, commented that he thought Seo was exaggerating, but he had never heard of someone with such a sensitive constitution that even treating a small wound could cause pain. In his mind, Hanja questioned whether Seo Anka was really a good young man, worthy of Alenia. He was sure he would be fine since he was the son-in-law chosen by his father, but upon meeting him, he couldn't make sense of it. Seo, feeling uncomfortable, told Hanja that it embarrassed her for him to look at her feet that way. Hanja, trying to justify his curiosity, commented that maybe it was because he lived alone in a remote area and that Seo seemed like someone from a completely different world. At that moment, the doctor announced that he had finished the treatment. Hanja, relieved, asked if they were leaving, suggesting that if they hurried, they could get there that same day. Seo, reflecting to herself, was surprised to think that not only had he forced her to come pick him up out of nowhere, but she also noticed that Hanja didn't seem upset about not showing respect when seeing the heir of the county. Maybe he was a better person than she thought. Zayed, approaching, told Seo that he would put her shoes on. Seo, nodding, replied that it was fine. At that moment, Hyan exclaimed that she couldn't believe the bodyguard was putting shoes on Seo, commenting that not even the royal family would be that annoying. She added that, having grown up like flowers in a greenhouse, she probably complained easily. Seeing Zayed putting the shoe on Seo, Hyan thought to herself that that kind of service sounded insidious. Hanja, addressing Seo, asked her to come over to him. Seo, nodding, approached. Seo glanced at Zayed, who looked somewhat sad. Then, she got into Hanja's luxurious car and commented that it was the first time she had seen a car like that, pointing out that there was nothing like it for several people to move around. Hanja told her he would guide her to a room on the second floor, assuring her that it was very well decorated so she could rest comfortably. Seo, admiring the place, expressed that it was a pleasant sight to see and mentioned how exhausting the bumpy car ride had been. In her mind, she thought it looked big from the outside, but the interior was mainly a residential space. Hanja told her to rest in peace. Seo, sitting down, wondered if this was the best room she had ever stayed in. Zayed, listening, commented that if he had known she would like it so much, he would have asked the Baron for a slightly bigger car. Seo, smiling, said it was fine, but she questioned how long the situation would last. Then, she reflected that if she really wanted to be a daughter-in-law, she would have to think about it. Zayed, sighing, asked her if she wanted something to drink. Seo, curious, asked if there was any alcohol, mentioning that she thought there were some good drinks. Zayed, in a serious tone, replied that there was no such thing. Seo, disappointed, commented that it was a waste. In his mind, Zayed thought that no matter how much time had passed since the attack, everything had returned to normal. Maybe Seo still hadn't regained her senses, or maybe she was stronger than she seemed. Zayed offered her some water. Seo asked him to give her a little water and to sit down for a moment, asking him to kneel like before. Then, she asked if he had gotten emotional a little while ago. Zayed, surprised, replied that he didn't think she would notice because it wasn't obvious, and he apologized. Seo, with a smile, called him a true scoundrel. Zayed, in a serious tone, reminded her that it was his injured foot. Seo, joking, said that she thought Zayed liked that she was hurt. Zayed, in his mind, reflected that he had gotten emotional because the other person was Seo. Finally, Seo asked him what was going on. Seo, placing her foot on Zayed's leg, told him that he needed to stay calm so as not to hurt her. She continued explaining that if it had been anyone else, she would have simply been upset, but she wondered if that was because it was Zayed. She reflected that maybe she had just gotten used to that situation in a few days. At that moment, Seo put on something warm, and you know what happened next. Seo threw a playful jab at Zayed, wink wink.